Hello everyone, this is Derek. Today I'm finally going to be doing my review of Persona 5 for the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 3. This review has been a long time in coming, but that's really because it's taken me such a long time to finish the game. And we're going to get to that when I get into the review, the length of the game, because it is a very, very substantial game. It's one that's going to take a lot of your time to finish, but is well worth it because this game is excellent, and I think it's a fantastic introduction to the series if you've never played a Persona game. So if you're in that boat and you haven't ever played a Persona game, I want to talk a little bit about the sort of general structure of what the Persona games are like, and then I'm also going to say a few things to the people who are familiar with that series and have been playing it for a while to kind of show you what the differences are between this one and some of the other ones, and how this game, in some ways, like I was mentioning, is improved on almost every aspect of the games that came prior. So the game is a Japanese role-playing game where you are in charge of a party of teammates, and you are fighting in turn-based combat, so very much sort of inspired by the old Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest kinds of games. But this one is a little bit different. When the Persona series started off, it was on the PlayStation 1. But when it moved to the PlayStation 2 with Persona 3, it really changed up its formula and really kind of came into its own as to what the Persona series is all about today. Now, some people will argue that the older ones are better. I'm not one of those people. I think that it actually really did improve when it came over to the PlayStation 2, because what it did is it introduced not just the dungeon crawling aspect of the game, which the series has always had, but it brought on a sort of life simulator aspect to it and a time management. So the way that the basic structure of the Persona games go is that you have a full calendar year within the game that the game takes place in. So that's the time frame. And every day of that calendar year, you have options of how you can choose to spend your time. And that may be going to an after-school job. It may be spending time with your friends. It may be going to the library and studying for a test, or joining the school band, or things like that. There are all these different things that basically just you as a high school student would be doing. But one of the other things that you can do with your time is choose to go into these different dungeons, fight monsters, level up, and progress the story that way. So it kind of has these two very different worlds that come together. And when I played my first Persona game, which was Persona 4, I was a little bit skeptical about that. I really didn't know if they were going to be able to marry those two styles. But what makes the Persona games so good is that they've done it so well. The game styles merge very well. One informs the other, and they play back and forth, and it's really a lot of fun. It also adds a lot of variety to the gameplay because you're not just constantly going through and clearing out dungeons, as well as you're not always just dealing with sort of this more, not mundane, but I guess kind of mundane aspect of living your life. So you have some really, some good options as far as to kind of keep things moving and keep things interesting for you depending on what you're looking for at the time. So, like I said, you have the dungeon crawling, you have the high school simulation. One of the things about the dungeon crawling also that's very important to the Persona games, and it's really important to all of the Shin Megami Tensei games, because the Persona games are in this sort of an umbrella family of games that are called the Shin Megami Tensei series, which actually started all the way back on the Super Nintendo, but it was only in Japan, so I guess it was the Super Famicom. But it's a game that or a game series that has the same monsters are all throughout it. It's also got a very strong emphasis on weaknesses and strengths in combat, so making sure that when you're fighting, you're attacking the weaknesses, and that'll give you bonuses, and if you attack something that they're strong against, that will hurt you. So there's a lot of things there are a lot of things between the two games that are similar, but like I said, the Persona series has kind of set itself apart from some of the others because it has this emphasis on the high school life simulator aspect of it. Another thing that's very important to the Shin Megami Tensei family of games is this idea of recruiting your party of sorts. Persona's a little bit different. We'll talk about that. But recruiting your party from the monsters you're fighting. So very much kind of like an adult Pokemon in a way, because the games are very dark. They are very, very much for adults, but they still have that sort of collectathon thing that that itch that Pokemon always scratches. You can find that in here as well. And one of the other things that's very exciting about the Shin Megami Tensei series is that not only can you get the monsters to fight for you, but then you have the option to fuse them to create even new monsters to fight for you. And some of these can get very elaborate, sometimes requiring as much as 6 different monsters that you're working with to fuse into one much stronger being. And it's just really fun, and it's something that if you are inclined at all toward the collectathon or filling out something at a game at 100%, this game will definitely keep you excited because it's just so addictive, and it's way more addictive. I'm generally not that kind of gamer for the most part, but when it comes to the Shin Megami Tensei family and the Persona games in general, or specifically, it really captures me. It really gets me going, and I spend so much time just collecting the monsters and fusing them and creating new things and finding out what I can do with that mechanic. So that's something that's a lot of fun if you like that sort of game. And if you aren't, like I said, if you were kind of like me and that wasn't really your thing, I'd still give this one a try because it is. It surprised me at how much I enjoyed that. So the storyline of Persona 5, to kind of get into the specifics of this game, is that you are, like I said, you are a high school student. It's retained that sort of theme. But what happens is at the beginning of the game, you are accused of a crime that you didn't commit, and you are sent to live with someone in Tokyo to kind of on a probationary period. While you're there, you're going to a different school, you're going to a different place to try to sort of get yourself back on track. And so the story unfolds from there, and what you find out is as you meet your different friends and come across, you realize that there is this sort of underworld called the metaverse that is something that is generated by the cognitive power of people. So the idea is that the cognitive power of people kind of comes together to create this sort of alternate dimension. And what happens in that alternate dimension is that some people have had such distorted desires and their cognition is so messed up that this alternate universe has created something they call a palace that's built up around their desire, and just in a way that is so completely distorted because of the distorted desires that they have. And what you are doing in the course of the game is you're going through these palaces to try to find the root cause of this distorted desire of this person and to steal it. They have this sort of, in this game, a thieving motif. So everything is sort of talked about in terms of infiltrating and scoping out the place and stealing in kind of like a burglary or a heist sort of story. But once you've stolen that root distorted desire, then the person will have a change of heart, and whatever it is that they were doing in the past, they will then seek redemption for. They will change their ways, and you're going out trying to make the world a better place because you've been afflicted by the world unfairly, so you are setting out to make the world a better place for other people. And the story progresses from there, and it gets deeper and deeper, and you learn more and more about the metaverse and what it is, that alternate dimension, and it just gets really, really deep. But one of the things I did like about the story in here is it's pretty straightforward. There's not really a lot of confusion in the game, because I know some of the other Persona games, and really just a lot of RPGs in general, especially I think because you're translating from Japanese to English, there are times where things get a little convoluted, story gets confusing, and I never had that problem with this game. So even though it sounds sort of heady and sort of intense, it really is very easy to follow, and it makes a lot of sense and is very, very engaging. The storyline is excellent and is definitely probably the strongest suit in the game, and I think it's probably the strongest suit in pretty much all the Persona games. One of the other things I wanted to mention here before we get into some of the differences between this game and the older games in the series is the style and the production quality of these games is through the roof. I mean, it is absolutely one of the most stylish, probably the most stylish game I've ever seen. And what I mean by that is every aspect of this game is designed. And even down to the menus, the interaction, the way that when you finish a combat, what comes up on screen, all of these things are so intricately designed, and there's so much attention to detail that it's just a delight to go through. In fact, I hear this from a lot of reviewers, and I would agree because I did it myself. You will go to the menu screen, which generally in an RPG is something that you just kind of have to deal with. But I found myself going there and just flipping to different pages because it looked so cool. And the way that the pages transitioned from one to the other was so interesting. And it was just fascinating what they did. And I just remember when I was playing it, probably for the first time, probably my first session when I first got the game, I just kind of screamed out like, my gosh, it's so stylish. There is just so much attention to those little details, and it just is amazing to watch, and it's amazing to see how much love and attention has gone into this game. Along with that is the outstanding music. Now, the music in the Persona games has always been a highlight. And the main composer, Shoji Meguro, is one of probably, in my opinion, the greatest video game composer that I've ever heard. Because his music is one that I listen to all the time outside of the game. I've got it on my MP3 player. I'm always listening to the music because it's just so good. Now with Persona 5, it changed style a little bit. I would say 3 and especially 4 were kind of more of a J-pop sound. With Persona 3 having a little bit more of a metal influence, but definitely with Persona 4, the J-pop. This one starts to go into more of a jazzy kind of sound, and it is excellent. It is really, really cool. And fits everything. And again, the whole style, the whole production just gels and fits together really well. The only thing that I will have to say, there are a couple of tracks that I found really annoying, especially one of the ones in one of the dungeons we'll talk about in a minute. I really did find a little grating after a while, which is unfortunate because you spend a lot of time in this dungeon. But that was definitely the exception rather than the rule. Most of the tracks were fantastic and definitely something that you would want to listen to outside of the game. So let's talk about the differences between the old games and the new games. The first thing we'll talk about is the combat side of things, then we'll get into the non-combat side of things. So in the combat side of things, one of the biggest differences, and I think one of the most welcome differences, is that in the older Persona games, all of the dungeons were randomly generated. Well, I should say 3 and 4. 1 and 2 are different, but when you got into the sort of modern age of Persona with 3 and 4, the dungeons were randomly generated. And they were generally sort of nondescript, just hallways that you would walk down, and every time you go in there, it'd be laid out a little bit differently, but there really wasn't anything that was unique about each particular dungeon other than the sort of general look of it, but it was still very much just kind of an endless series of hallways. With Persona 5, these palaces that I was talking about, those are intricately designed. You go in there are puzzles, and there are specific ways to get through areas, and there are times where you even have to leave the dungeon to come out and do something in the real world that will affect the cognition, which will change the layout of the palace. I mean, there's so much going on, and it's all very intricately designed. So the dungeons are way more engaging, a lot more fun to go through. And if you had a problem with the older Persona games feeling like the dungeons just kind of got samey or grindy, this is really going to be an eye-opener for you because it's totally different, and it's totally, it just really is so much more engaging and exciting to go through. And it means every time you go into a new one, you're just so excited to see what's going to happen and see how it's going to play out and with how they're going to have designed it. Now, if you liked the old system, and I have to admit that even though I completely understood all the arguments against it being boring, and it could be, I did kind of like it for level grinding, because just something about the fact that it would change every time, even though it's kind of repetitive, it still was a little bit interesting by having it something that would change every time you went into it. So if you had wanted to go in level grind or search for the personas to add to your party, in the way that Persona does it, which is a little different than Shin Megami Tensei, but I'll get into that later. If you were doing that, it kind of, I felt, was a little bit more fun. The initial time through was boring, but if you wanted to go back through and level grind, it actually made it a lot nicer because you had the variety of the layouts. Well, with Persona 5, they actually do have a dungeon that does that. So there is one dungeon called Mementos, which is one that's not really any one particular person's palace. It's sort of just the general metaverse. It's the background radiation, if you will, of the cognition of the people in the city that have generated this sort of alternate reality. And in this one, it's basically laid out kind of like an old school dungeon crawler. You go to different floors, and every time you go to these floors, the layout will change, and you have to kind of explore and find the exit to get to the next level, very much in the same vein that Personas 3 and 4 were. So if you liked that style, they've got you covered in this. It's just the other ones are more intricate. Now, unfortunately, like I was mentioning before, the one track of music that I really kind of hated was the Mementos background music, which is unfortunate because you go to Mementos a lot because it's the biggest dungeon as far as just size, and you're going back there to level grind and to search for new personas. And unfortunately, the music is really annoying. So that's the only one that's kind of the one sort of bad mark I have on the music, but it's unfortunate because it is in Mementos, which you spend a lot of time in. But regardless, I love the fact that they gave you both. They did not take something away without, or give you something new without, they didn't just change it. And I'm glad of that, because I think I would have been a little bit disappointed if they had just changed it and not given me the option of going through something that was randomly generated, because there were there was something to that. And I think that they recognized that. One of the other things to talk about with the differences in the combat has to do with the weaknesses. So like I mentioned before, the Shin Megami Tensei series is one of the kind of defining points of the combat in those games is the fact that you need to focus on enemy weaknesses. And in Persona 4, and I believe in Persona 3 as well, although I might be wrong about that one, but I know Persona 4, you had fire, ice, wind, lightning, light, and dark, and a physical attack. So you had those different weaknesses. And in the Persona 5, you still have those, but they've also now added a gun attack, and they've added nuclear, and they've added psychic. And so, as well as they've changed the way light and dark works a little bit. In the other games, light and dark was pretty much just insta-kill spells, and they would fail a lot of times, whereas this time they still have the insta-kill, but they also have things that just do light or dark damage, which I kind of like. Although it did make me use the insta-kill spells very rarely, because I don't like something I don't know is going to hit, or has a fairly low percentage chance of hitting. But I do think that it kind of was a little overwhelming at first, especially if you played the older games. You're like, wow, there are a whole bunch of new weakness types, but they do make sense, and eventually you do get used to it. And I think because they've added, your party is pretty big. You've got all of your bases covered, but it does kind of mix things up quite a bit. And especially if you played the older series, the older games in the series, you'll know that just adding one or two more weakness types can really change a lot of things. The guns are a little interesting too, because with guns, I found myself really not leveling up or trying to even buy new guns, because really I only dealt with it for the weaknesses. And if I had the weakness, then I could attack with other things after that. But it really just didn't find that they did a whole lot of damage. Plus you're limited on ammunition. So every time you go into the dungeon, you have a certain amount of ammunition. And once you've spent it, you've spent it. There are some items that you can get that will let you replenish it, but they are a little bit harder to come by. So you have to be a little bit sparing with that. And so I really didn't feel like the gun was quite as fleshed out as it could have been. Although I think if you really were interested in that, you could develop that, because there is one character, one of the social link, for lack of a better term, characters that you will get to know that will let you improve some of your guns. But I didn't really get into that aspect of it. So that may be something, from my impression, the guns, I didn't feel like were all that fleshed out, but it was partly because I didn't focus on that. So really kind of is going to depend on what you like. I still felt like overall, though, with the limitations of the ammunition and the fact that they really weren't much stronger or were weaker than your regular physical attack, I found it kind of hard to know when to use them, other than when something was specifically weak to that. So the other thing is to kind of the next aspect of the combat that I want to talk about is how you get your personas. So like I mentioned, in the Shin Megami Tensei family of games, you will try to collect these different monsters to be on your team. In the Persona games, it's a little bit different, because you don't actually recruit them to be on your team as much as you recruit them to sort of be something that buffs up your main character. You can equip a different persona at different times, and that will affect which spells you have access to, as well as what you're weak and strong against. So your main character is going to be changing out personas all the time, and you're really going to want to have a nice selection of them to choose from to be able to take care of whatever situation comes up. But in the past, there have been just a lot of different ways that you got them and were able to collect them. But in Persona 5, they have taken something from the core Shin Megami Tensei games and introduced negotiation. Now, what that means is, if you have a chance, if you've attacked an enemy and made them weak, you have an option to talk to them, to try to convince them to come onto your side. And they will have a personality type, and depending on that personality type, gloomy, optimistic, that sort of thing, it will kind of give you an option or give you an idea of what dialogue selections you want to choose when talking to this persona to try to get them to come on board with you. Now, some people like this and some don't. I do think it's kind of interesting, but it can be a little bit frustrating, because sometimes it really is hard to tell which dialogue option is going to work based on the personality type. And sometimes it feels just a little bit arbitrary. So it can get frustrating if there really is a specific persona that you're looking for. But I do think it's really fun. And one of the things that's also nice is that when you there are ways to improve the way that you negotiate with them. There are ways in the game that you can improve that to make it a little bit easier for you if you're having some trouble. The other thing that's nice though is that if you weaken an enemy enough, or a lot of times if you just attack the other monsters that it's fighting with enough and kill them, and it can definitely tell that you are a lot stronger than it is, it may just offer to come on board without you having to negotiate. It might say, hey, please don't kill me. I'll do anything. I'll come work for you if you want. So honestly, when it got toward the middle and end game, I wasn't really using the negotiation stuff all that often because I found that I would kind of come across monsters that just wanted to come on board with me, or I just kept fusing and getting new monsters that way. So it really didn't seem like it was something that if you didn't like that in the Shin Megami Tensei games, I don't think it's something to really be worried about here, because I think you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine going through it without, even though sometimes it can be a little bit awkward to know what to do. So now that's kind of combat. Let's go into non-combat, the non-combat differences. So two of the easiest ones to talk about, there are some new mini games that you can do that you can choose to spend your time doing. There's batting cages where you can try to hit a ball, and it'll improve some of your stats as well as give you some items. And there's also a really fun fishing mini game that you can do. So if you spend time going fishing, you can collect things and trade in for items and stuff, and also develop other stats. But the fishing game is really fun, and it's actually a shame because I rarely went to it, because most of the time I didn't feel like it was the best use of that time slot that I had. But I wish that I could have done it more often, because I actually really thought it was a fun little fishing mini game. It was very simple, but it was fun. So I would like to have done it more if I could have, but most of the time I just didn't feel like it was worth spending my time slot on it. So getting into the non-combat stuff, and I probably should have talked about this sooner, but I kind of got distracted, is one thing that's a very important part of the Persona games since Persona 3 is what used to be called social links. And what it is when you are, like I said, when you are choosing at times to spend your time slot by hanging out with certain friends, you will develop a relationship with them, and that relationship will level up. And each person represents a certain type of a persona family, and as you level up that relationship, then the persona fusions that you create that are within that family are going to be stronger. One of the things I love that they did with this game, however, is that in the older games, your party members, as you leveled them up, would also get certain in-combat abilities as you leveled up the relationship with them. And that's the same now, but that has also sort of translated to the characters that are not in your party. So, for example, there is one character who is a politician, and he gives speeches. And if you get to know him better, then he will give you abilities as you level up his relationship to negotiate with the demons better, so that you have a better chance of getting personas on your team. Another one will give you different types of abilities you can use in combat. One of them, like I mentioned, will let you customize your guns and do all these things with that. I didn't get into that part of it. It's just one thing but the thing about these social links, which the Persona 5 game calls them confidants, you really don't have time on a single playthrough to max out all of them. So you sometimes kind of have to pick and choose. This game is pretty good. I got through, I think, all but 3 or 4 maxed out. So it's actually very generous in that it will let you do a lot of them, but there are still going to be some you just aren't going to have time to do. So that's something to be aware of. And unfortunately, the one that lets you level up your guns is one that I just didn't get a chance to finish out. But I really like that. I really like the fact that not only are you getting involved in the story, but it's also giving you something else that benefits you in some way, whereas the other ones, it really was just about leveling up your personas when you fuse them. If I'm remembering correctly. Now, I will give this little caveat that it's been a while since I played the other games. I might be misremembering that. I don't remember there being anything this in-depth where different levels of that relationship will give you all these different bonuses. I don't think there are. But if I'm wrong, someone call me out on it, but I just don't think there are. I didn't get a chance to go back and kind of run through the Persona 3 or 4 to kind of see if my memory is correct. But even if there are some, I don't think it's as involved or as in-depth as this one is. I mean, every single confidant will give you really excellent bonuses. And it really will help you kind of decide which ones you want to focus on, because it depends on the bonuses that they're giving you and which ones you think are going to best benefit your play style. Which again was probably why I didn't go into the one with the guns, because I really didn't use guns all that often. Um, Another thing that I really love about what they did with the confidants in this game is that you have a chance to look at the map when you are in the game, and you can see the different areas, and it'll tell you which confidants are there and are ready to be spoken with. Because you can't go to every single character and spend time with them on every single day. Some days they're available, some days they're not. And in the other games, you'd kind of have to walk to every area and see, are they there? If you talk to them, are they available? And it just was kind of time consuming. So this is just a very simple little quality of life thing that they have added that lets you just kind of see at a glance where you can go to kind of plan things out, which I think was actually a really nice little feature, a little tweak that made the game a lot more fun to go through. So I think that kind of covers the basics of the differences between the old games and the new games, and kind of talks about what I like about them. There are some things that I think are a little bit weak in this game. So the game is not perfect, and no game is. Although I will say this one comes very close because it's an excellent game, and these weaknesses are certainly not anything that would make you want to shy away from playing it. But there are some things I wanted to talk about. One of the things, and this is maybe somewhat subjective, is I didn't really feel the same type of connection or chemistry with the characters, with the main, especially the main party characters. And I think that some of it has to do with there's sort of an overall theme in the game of all of these characters being an outcast of some sort or not having kind of being loners. Like your character, I mean, he's accused of a crime. He's going somewhere new. He's got this sort of record where everybody thinks he's a criminal. I mean, he's definitely someone who's been ostracized from society quite a bit. So there's, I think, an element of a wall that some of the characters put up between themselves that does get broken through, but it's a very different feel than when you had characters in Personas 3 and 4 that had been going to school since they were kids and were very close and knew each other. And there's a certain camaraderie that I just didn't feel like Persona 5 quite hit. And there's certain ways that I just didn't feel as connected to the characters. Now that, again, could be extremely subjective. I'm just kind of pointing this out. This is my experience with it. But and I think that with Persona 4 being the first one that I played in the series and is my favorite game of all time, it's going to be hard for any game to compete with that, especially on these sort of subjective character storyline levels. And I recognized that going into it. I knew that it really wasn't going to be something that in my heart could ever compete with Persona 4. But I do think there are some ways that you can kind of I really do feel like there's a difference in the level, especially of the chemistry between the characters. I really don't think it's entirely all my subjective feelings, and I think there is something there for that. So that's not quite as good. I also really feel like a couple of aspects were lost. One of the things, again, because you're sort of an outcast, you don't spend a lot of time at school. You do, I mean, you go to class every day, but there aren't any after-school clubs you can join. You can't join the band, you can't join student council, you can't do anything within the school. And even though I understand from a storyline perspective why they did that, I feel like it kind of hurt a little bit because I know in Persona 4 I love joining the band, I love the student council, all these different things that I could do that I just can't do in 5, and I feel a little bit more disconnected from my life as a student. And maybe that's what they were going for, but I just feel like it's a little bit unfortunate because I enjoyed some of those things. But one thing I also feel like was definitely lacking that I don't really think you can chalk up to it being that sort of outcast storyline aspect was the romance. So in the Persona games, you get a chance to romance one or multiple characters depending on what you choose. And you do get that in Persona 5 as well, but I just didn't feel like the romances were completely as fleshed out as I would have liked. And I don't want to get into why that is because it kind of gets into spoilery territory and I don't want to do that. But I just didn't feel like those romances were quite as integral to the character. I mean, I really felt like in Persona 4, not as much in Persona 3, but Persona 4 I felt really nailed it where that relationship that you had was really talked about several times, and it was something that you could see was changing the characters a little bit. And it could partly be because I played Persona 4 on the Vita, and I believe in that version, the golden version, they might have added a scene. I don't know if the ski section in Persona 4 was in the original or not. I never played the one on the PlayStation 2, which that has some elements of the romance. So they might have fleshed it out. So I may be not really comparing it apples to apples. However, I mean, this is post Persona 4 Golden, and you can definitely tell there are some things that they've brought in from Persona 4 Golden into this one. So I feel like it could have been done. And I feel like it should have been done a little bit better because that's one thing I just never felt really connected to that romance in Persona 5. And another thing I feel needs to be talked about is the length. So I mentioned this game has taken me a long time to finish, months. My playthrough time was nearly 140 hours, which is insane. I mean, I've never played a single player game that was that long. I've never put that much time into a single player game. Now, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But that is huge. And I do think, just kind of based on what I've been hearing, I think that my playthrough may be a little bit longer. I probably spent more time level grinding and persona fusing than maybe your average player has. But I still feel like the most average sort of player is going to be in it at least 100 hours. And that's fine. A long game, there's nothing wrong with having a really long game, but I do feel like this one is a little too long because I feel like, especially toward the end, some of the palaces, some of the dungeons just got a little boring and they felt very samey, like they didn't have the imagination that the early dungeons had. I could definitely feel like a lot more effort was put in those early dungeons, which I understand. You kind of want to make a good first impression, but really you want that good impression to go all the way through. And some of the latter dungeons, especially one in particular, was just boring. It was just a boring dungeon, very obvious puzzles that weren't fun or challenging to solve, and it really felt like I was just trying to get through the dungeon because it was so dull. And so I feel like there really could have been some editing on this thing, and if they wanted to, I feel like you're cutting out certain aspects of romance and things like that I want, but you have too many dungeons, or at least dungeons that if you're going to have that many, you have to make sure they're all of the same level of quality, and some of them weren't. So that's kind of an issue. I don't think it's something that should scare you off, because really, depending on how you want to do it, if you really wanted to play on the game and focus on the story, which is, again, the main draw of the Persona games is the story, put the difficulty on easy or super easy or whatever it is, and just barrel through it. Because really a lot of that time is spent leveling up and fusing personas and stuff and doing these things, whereas if you can just kind of barrel through, sure, it's not going to make the combat as interesting, but at least it's going to help you get through that, focus on the story if time is an issue for you. Because as an adult gamer, I totally get that time is hard to come by, and which is why it's taken me so long to get through that game. We just don't have the time that we used to when we get to be my age. Now, there is one also last thing I want to talk about with this game, and this is kind of outside the game, so you're going to take this with a grain of salt, but I can't do a review without talking about this one aspect, because it's really something that kind of broke my heart in a way, because I'm a huge Atlus fan. Ever since I played Persona 4, I have been the biggest Atlus fanboy. I make sure I never buy their games used. I only buy them new because I want to make sure that they are getting their cut. I generally try to buy them. If I have any interest in a game at all, I try to buy it the week it comes out because I want the sales numbers to be good. I really try to be a good customer simply because they have done so well by me for so long. And every game that I've played of theirs has been just of a certain quality. They are well known for being such a good, consistently good development studio. And I don't think that this call necessarily came from Atlus. I'm sure it came from Sega, who owns Atlus. But regardless, it really, really stinks, because again, I've had this loyalty to this company because I feel like they always do well by me. So they do well by me as a consumer, so I want to return the favor and give them the money to help them to continue to create the quality products that I enjoy. But this kind of just felt, this, I haven't gotten to what it is, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but there was a thing that happened that really made me feel, it isn't trying to be as good to the consumers as they had been in the past. And that has to do with the sharing and streaming controversy. So if you haven't heard, Atlus put out a very angry sort of memo type of thing or announcement saying that they didn't want people to stream the game because they didn't want spoilers. And so they threatened to take people's YouTube channels down, not take the channels down, but take the videos down or file copyright claims on these videos if they went past a certain date in the gameplay. Which is ridiculous, because the thing about it is, and I'm not a streamer, so this isn't something that I have necessarily skin in the game, but I completely understand that in today's world, that's how people are learning about games, and that's where people are going to for games, and that's where the YouTube presence and the Twitch presence, that is a huge part of gaming today. And I think that it's just kind of so completely naive and so completely tone deaf to not understand that and to start trying to put restrictions on it, not just restricting, but threatening. The other thing about it, I just don't believe them, because the thing is, they're talking about spoilers. And if that's their main reason that they don't want people to do that, well, that's ridiculous. Because the thing is spoilers don't come from watching a Let's Play. At least because spoilers are if you're getting spoiled for something that you don't want to know. And if I don't want to know about something, I'm not going to go watch a Let's Play for it. If that's a choice that I'm making that's setting myself up for being spoiled. Where spoilers come from are like random YouTube comments or forum posts or just different meme sharing sites where something happens that reveals part of it that that Atlas isn't controlling by coming down with these sort of threatening measures on people who are streaming. So I just don't buy it. I think what's happening is they know that their game is a story-driven game, and that's what people come for, and they don't want people to just pull up a Let's Play and watch that instead of buying their game. So it's all about them worrying that the consumer's not going to buy, or their people are not going to buy their game because they're going to watch it instead. And it's just so tone deaf. It's so completely ridiculous because anyone that's interested in playing this kind of game or that has this interest in Persona, and Persona is extremely popular, I mean, watching a Let's Play isn't going to cut it. And for the people that would watch a Let's Play, they're probably not people that are going to buy your game anyway. I mean, that's just not, if you can watch 100 hours of gameplay and be satisfied, you're not someone that's going to ever really buy the game. I mean, that's just because you're obviously not getting the same thing that other people are. Because yes, the story is the main draw, but that's just one part of it. I mean, again, if that's the case, I mean, they have, and I'm sure this will happen eventually. Persona 3, Persona 4 all have like mangas and anime and all these things that they've made that go through the story. So Persona 5 is going to have that too, I'm sure. So it's not like if you want just the story, there are ways to get that without buying the game anyway, or will be. So I don't know. I feel like the whole thing was kind of ridiculous. Now, like I said, I don't have skin in the game. I'm not a streamer, so it's not something that would necessarily bother me. But the one thing that did bother me, because they were so paranoid about people, I don't know, streaming their game, that they disabled all the sharing functionality on the PlayStation 4, which means no screenshots, no videos. When you get a trophy, it doesn't take a screenshot for you. Nothing. And that, I mean, you only get one playthrough. They may change that later, people, and I'm not really huge on saving the screenshots that I get for trophies, but you might. And the thing about it is you can't get those again. I mean, you're done. You've got the trophy. You're never going to be able to get that screenshot again. And the thing is, I just don't understand. Like, again, my brain cannot get around how they think this is a good idea. I mean, on my Vita, I probably have 200 screenshots of Persona 4 because I love the game. I take it and I use it as background wallpaper for my Vita, or I sent it to people, I posted to do things, and not because I'm trying to give spoilers or trying to encourage people to not play the game. It's generally like, oh my gosh, this was such a funny line. Look at this. And then people are like, oh, that's really cool. Where did that come from? What game is that? It generates interest in the game because you're sharing it and spreading it and talking about it. And when you restrict that, now with Persona 5, I mean, there were so many times I wish I could have taken a screenshot just to have something to go back and remember. I mean, I do that sometimes with my Persona 4 screenshots. I'll go back and go through them to try to remember, sort of reminisce and have a moment of nostalgia. And I just hate that they did that. So again, it doesn't change the gameplay. It doesn't change the game. The game is still just as good as it always is, whether they do that or not. But I couldn't do this review without mentioning it because it's something that made me so angry. And it took a company that I thought I had a good relationship with as a consumer because I'm spending money on them. They're giving me stuff that I want, and which is, hey, that's capitalism. That's the way it works. That's wonderful. You give me what I want. I give you what you want. Everybody wins. And now I feel like they're not going to be able to do that anymore. Or it makes me worried about what's going to be going down in the future. Are they going to be able to provide for me the gameplay I want? Or is it something that now they're starting this, they're going to start cutting away things to make it as DLC later, or adding microtransactions, or doing all this stuff that I'm just worried that they're getting influenced by the sort of negative aspects of some of the bigger game companies. And I was always hoping Atlas could kind of keep themselves apart from that a bit. So this has been a huge review. I knew it would be. I mean, the game is 140 hours. I knew I couldn't talk about it in 10 minutes. I had to really get a lot of things off my chest about it. But bottom line, if you are at all interested in Japanese role-playing games, even if you're not, try this game out. I mean, this game is one I feel like could change your mind if you're open to different types of games, unless you're really just pure action and that's all you're interested in, which is fine. But if that's not the case, I would say give it a shot. You might really enjoy it. And the thing is, if you've played the Persona games, chances are probably you've already played this one. But even if you haven't, if you're on the fence, if you're not sure, get it. It is amazing. And again, even though it's not necessarily my favorite Persona game because of my personal relationship with Persona 4, it is, from an objective standpoint, the best Persona game. And really the best, probably the best JRPG, well, definitely the best JRPG of this generation, possibly the best RPG of this generation. I mean, there's a lot of competition, but I'd say I think it's the best role-playing game I've played in this generation so far. So we'll see if anything usurps it. But it's outstanding. Go pick it up, play it, love it, and join the cult like all the other Atlus fanboys out there. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad to finally be able to get this review to you. I hope to have some more coming up, but we'll just kind of see how things go. Like I said, being an adult is hard and it takes up a lot of time, but I really do appreciate everyone that watches, comments, and subscribes.